free to drop. There we go. Thank you, Cameron. You can drop introductions in the chat. We'd love to know where everyone's joining us from, your organization, your name, anything else you'd like to share, honestly. Oh, I see some more folks are coming in. So thanks for joining us. This is going to be the workshop and breakout on broadband. ReImagine Appalachia has been doing some research. We just actually released our paper. I guess a little less than a month ago now. Cameron or Steve or I can drop that in the chat in a moment. But feel free to check out that report. It's mostly targeted around BEAD implementation, which Cameron and Steve are going to talk about in just a moment. So for folks that don't know me, I'm Molly Updegrove. I'm the Director of Outreach with ReImagine Appalachia. And I have just sort of been helping do a lot of the organizing, cat herding, so to speak, around our broadband work. So I'll sort of be acting as a facilitator. Cameron Snowden is one of our incredible research associates. He's going to be our note taker, but is also going to talk to you guys in just a minute, catch you up to speed on where ReImagine has been on broadband. And Steve Herzenberg, who is one of our co-directors here at ReImagine Appalachia and also the executive director at Keystone Research Center, he is also going to go ahead and catch us up to speed. So I think with that, I am actually going to go ahead and pass it off to you, Steve, to get us rolling here. Oh, Steve, you're on mute. Sorry.
Let's try that. How's that?
Yep, we're all good.
Sorry about my landline in the background. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Molly, for that introduction. Again, as Molly laid out, I will put the link in the chat unless someone beats me to it as soon as I'm done introducing Cameron to our December paper, which really outlined about 8 recommendations that state plans ought to include for giving out each state's formula share of the biggest pot of broadband money in the bipartisan infrastructure law, a $42.5 billion pile of money, which will be given out basically based on the documentation of how poor a state's broadband is currently. This is going to be a pretty drawn out process. There's a timeline in our paper. Some of that is because the process starts with an effort, which we'll talk about more, which is to improve maps of what broadband speeds and availability is in each state. Historically, the Federal Communications Commission's tracking of broadband speed has been, there's no other word for it, a complete joke. But they're in the process of trying to make it somewhat less farcical. And so that means that the states can't really begin their planning about where money should go until the maps, to some extent, free. We'll dig more into that, but I think a good catch up for folks is going to be the principles we put out in December. We did that for the whole 4-state region. We did that knowing that the next stage in the political process is the state level plan development and engagement around, what each state says to the feds that it will do with its share of the money. So we know the next phase of the process partly includes a little bit like the abandoned mineland example for anyone who was in that workshop. Will involve a partial shift to advocacy in each individual state, but and really over the course of the full calendar year, actually. But with that, Cameron, take it away and give people a lightning round kind of overview of our principles.
Sure thing, Steve. Let me just show this slide here. Okay. All right. So in our brief that ReImagine released, like Molly said, I think a month or 2 ago at this point, we touched on 8 key principles, as Steve said.
Sorry, for some reason we can't see the screen. It says it's loading.
Well,
we might sit. You can probably just walk through them if not. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. No worries.
Or if you wanted to retry one more time, maybe. Yep, we can see it there. It's just whenever you click slideshow, for some reason it was just saying loading.
Okay, well,
Maybe
I
we
guess
can zoom in really close here.
yeah. Is this any
Yep,
better?
that's good.
Okay, cool. So we highlighted 8 main principles for maximizing good jobs with fair labor standards, as well as the expansion of high-speed, reliable, and affordable broadband with broadband equity access and employment funds from the BEAD program. So those 8 priorities that we highlighted were encouraging stakeholders to challenge the initial FCC maps and continually update publicly available maps to maximize the effective use of public funds, because maps are kind of the backbone of how the funds get allocated. Deploying fiber optic technology to achieve universal high-speed, reliable, and affordable service at the modern 100/100 standard of upload and download speeds. Implementing strong labor and community benefit and local hiring standards that include strong training components, again, ensuring fair labor standards, and that jobs are locally sourced to further benefit communities. Incorporating comprehensive digital equity and inclusion provisions to ensure that even the lowest income people in our region not only have access to broadband internet, but also know how to effectively use it and have the means to do so. Regulating broadband as an essential utility and opportunistically and efficiently building publicly owned middle mile networks on public infrastructure projects. Doing this would allow the state to effectively build upon and expand the existing fiber backbone in whatever state it may be, Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, while also tackling other infrastructure projects. It's otherwise known as the Dig Once principle. Awarding grants to providers that will best meet labor and community benefit standards and offer high-speed reliability and affordability. Again, selecting how to allocate or choosing how to allocate funds is a major part of what we looked at in the brief. Giving priority to regional entities with the capacity to hold providers accountable, including by developing local leadership focused on the public good. We recognize that a lot of rural communities in Appalachia don't have the capacity to effectively negotiate with ISPs or track down grant funds, apply for grant funds, because they have limited resources. So part of the approach should be giving them the capacity and resources to do those things effectively. And lastly, implementing federal broadband leadership that ensures all communities and families have the broadband speeds, reliability, and affordability that is essential to thrive in the 21st century. As we know, policy is often set at the federal level and then trickles down elsewhere. So having the Biden administration set that example in the White House would be immensely beneficial to what we're trying to do with broadband in reimagined states. So with that, I'll stop sharing first, and then I will turn, who's next? I believe it's...
I got it. Thank you though, Cameron. That was helpful. Background and context. So for folks that haven't been as engaged in ReImagine Appalachia's broadband work, I hope that helped give you a little bit of context and background, but we really want the goal of this workshop today to be focused on hearing from you all and having some discussion around the next steps for implementation. So Steve, I'll let you jump in here if you want for a moment, but I believe we were maybe going to kick things off with talking some more about the mapping process and the map challenge process and what's sort of needed there.
Yeah, exactly right. So as we talked about a little bit at the beginning, again, we're shifting from, okay, these are the principles that make sense for our 4 states and frankly for all 50 states. But now the conversation shifts to some extent to how do you operationalize these principles, in each state and in each state plan. And so again, Molly rightly identified, there's one very immediate issue on which we'd love people's input is around the maps. I mean, that's the first step in the process, and there were draft maps that were released in November. There's what's called a challenge process to the maps. There's both the possibility of quote bulk challenges that states or internet service providers can do if they think big pieces of the information in the original maps are wrong, and there's also an individual challenge process that people can participate in. We got a couple of documents that we can put in the chat, which provide a bit more background on those efforts. But one of them actually is one of our partners on this work has been the Communications Workers of America, and they kind of have a grassroots broadband brigade that includes a bunch of their members in different places. So they have a fact sheet that kind of explains for their members and for those brigade folks what the challenge process is. But the reality is that the technical challenges and the capacity challenges to the bulk challenge process are substantial, which is why it's going to be actors like states and ISPs that are mostly engaged with that process. So one of our questions for folks who are engaged with this issue or folks who are experts on this issue, is if they have thoughts around, practical ways in which ReImagine and or its partners can engage more in, the mapping process. I don't know whether any of the folks in the breakout are currently engaged at all with that process.
Yeah, and if not, or even if you are only partially engaged, what do you see as some like potential needs in that arena? Like Steve said, we at ReImagine Appalachia want to know how we can get involved and help, especially since there obviously are some sticky challenges related to this. So we want to make sure this is done right. So love to hear from you folks on what you see as the challenges related to the new FCC maps that were just released. And I did just drop in the chat a couple links to look at if you'd like some more information.
I'll chime in real quick. And my name is Chris Field. I work with Community Internet Solutions in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're a nonprofit ISP. I really think that more oomph, as much as could be given, could be put behind the request to delay the freeze date, so that municipalities have time to catch up. Just like with the Your Home, Your Internet pilot grant program, there just isn't time to do these, to assemble. There are only going to be 20 of these pilots nationwide, and we only had, with the holidays and stuff, there wasn't enough time to assemble the powerful coalitions needed to submit a legitimate application for one of those grants. Just like with the mapping, there hasn't been enough time. It's only been 2 months. I've done a number of individual submissions, and it's numbing work. It takes time. You want to compare it, then you have to get a screenshot, and then it's a slow server, so it takes time for the image to upload. And I can only do 1 or 2 neighborhoods just by myself. We've got a whole region for the Appalachian region to be concerned with. So it has to, as you said, it has to be the municipalities that do this. And they, in my experience working with municipalities in our region, they don't know what's going on. They just know this deep anxiety that there's, oh my gosh, $1 billion. How do I get this? What do I need to do? And because we hadn't had that full court press of education and awareness, which is part and parcel to this effort in communication, people are confused. And they're anxious now because they feel like they're missing hundreds of millions or tens of millions or even a couple $1 million, which is a huge deal for a lot of people, a lot of municipalities. And they don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn. and the FCC just says, oh, well, you can challenge it. Well, as I've said in other places, when we challenge it, we're not even fully informed on what we're challenging, because most of us come to the map and say, those speeds aren't correct. I challenge those speeds. The FCC map isn't asking you to challenge the speeds. They're asking you, is service available, mass market service available in this location within this time period? That's a completely different question. And most of us don't even know that that's what they're asking us to challenge. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate that. We'll be in touch with you offline if that's okay, to learn a bit more from you, because one of the questions is whether or not we can work with you to maybe leverage some of what you've learned from your, the efforts you just described. That would be fantastic.
Sure. Molly and I we've met before, so we can happy to chat.
All right, that's perfect. And in terms of the money we're leaving on the table, Pennsylvania at least, which is obviously the state I'm in. I mean, the estimate that kind of Pennsylvania's mapping expert made based on a quick and dirty look at the original maps is that Pennsylvania would lose at least $100 million because of, in his estimation, the claims about availability, were off base and assuming greater availability than really exists in his view in Pennsylvania. Any other thoughts around, the maps and
Yeah, I see April has her hand raised.
Go for it, April.
Yeah, so I just dropped in the chat an example of how I wrote a community, but really it's the whole county is doing the challenge. It's Wayne County in Northeast PA, and they put out like the call to their residents to comment on if the information provided on the map is wrong or missing, is how they framed it. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I've been to a meeting where they talked about like their intention to work out the gaps in the service there, and then to work with the Pennsylvania Broadband Authority to try to get more funds. And they brought in a consultant to work with them on this. And the county commissioners even put out like the challenge, to match, like the county's going to put in so much funding, maybe a foundation there is going to put in some funding, and then asking for other municipalities to also become a part of it. And I thought, they're a place I've seen be very collaborative in terms of their planning, very data driven, and just also like seeking community input from various levels. Just they're really good at what they do. So I just hold that up as an example to go look at and how they do it. And I feel like they're a little ahead of the curve, maybe.
Great.
Yeah, right. It's nice to see. And I would think like just from what you said, I mean, isn't that kind of like, what's the first step for community? Kind of to figure out what they need, but maybe also to just like every state got money, right, for their broadband.
Yep.
So, right, talk to the state broadband development authority or whatever agency in your state is doing it. Maybe that's something ReImagine Appalachia could like help to compile or something, just so people know who to talk to. Because like on the one hand, right, that should be part of even just county development plans, a hazard mitigation plan, like people don't have access. That's a big problem in a hazardous situation, right? Like a snowstorm or, a tropical storm, which we also get over here in Northeast Pennsylvania.
So one question I've got based on both the last two speakers is there an organized effort to, again, the FCC calls the January 13th deadline, which is what, a few days from now, where people are supposed to, if they can, get their challenges in to the mid-November maps by January 13. Now, they call that a soft deadline, even though they also say that if you want your information definitely included, you should try to meet that deadline. But is there an organized advocacy effort to sort of get even that initial deadline pushed back?
It's not like I've seen.
Who was Molly, your buddy who spoke before? Was that Joe?
Chris, I see you just came off mute.
Hi.
Yeah.
There was a letter submitted through the NDIA with,
Okay.
I want to say like 40 to 80 partners, to Chairperson Rosen Worsel to request more time. And I don't know the outcome of that, but it was pretty powerful.
Okay, that's great, Chris. We can, Molly, we can talk. I don't know whether Bill Callahan's here or anyone else from NDIA, but we can check with them later in terms of maybe it's too late for RA to, or any of its partners to endorse that call. But we should, check with them about whether that's something we can engage with. All right, let me move on. I mean, to the second big area where we're looking for input is on one of the issues that's core for ReImagine really across the board, which is the labor standards issue. The white paper, so the broad picture here is like really many parts of the construction industry in this country, unfortunately. There's a lot of variation when it comes to broadband build out and last mile work to take broadband to the premises. There's a lot of variation in terms of whether it's done with a skilled, decently paid, experienced, safe workforce that will do high quality work that is reliable in the long run, versus sometimes it's done by so-called shoddy or low road contractors, that pay poorly, don't have good training systems, have pretty high turnover. So one of the things we did, again, in 3 pages of the brief, is provide a little bit of an overview on shoddy contractors and high road, low road in general in the construction industry, and using a national database on violations by industry, documenting, that over a period of time, there's been a heck of a lot of violations of labor standards in the broadband industry. And then we also, with the help of some folks at the IBEW, I think it was Kentucky was where this example came, but they gave us a concrete example and sent us some pictures of shoddy work. The communications workers has a great file, Google Doc with examples of shoddy contractors from across the country. As it turned out, their Google Doc doesn't happen to have examples from our 4 states, but it's still a great resource in terms of documenting that shoddy contractors are endemic. But we were able, with the IBW folks, to document that a specific example from our region. And then another piece of that initial analysis, was one of the big ISPs, I think it's Windstream, has begun to expand its internal workforce because it's tired of the headaches associated with contracting out. So it's actually going to grow its union workforce, whether that's CWA or IBEW, in different places. And I mean, this pretty powerful testimony on the inadequacy of low road contractors, when a company, is choosing to, pay a good deal more in terms of wages and benefits, because it recognizes that it's in the company's interest, as well as obviously in customers' interest and in the public interest in terms of getting value for money from this federal investment. So a question here is, we've done that kind of educational work. What are people's thoughts around the next steps, and as the advocacy shifts to the state level, people's thoughts around specific things that we, ReImagine should do in the next year around the labor standards issues in broadband.
Everyone's being a little shy. Well, I mean, I was going to say one very specific, I mean, maybe we can make it an even more specific question that we had on our document related to this is sort of like trying to understand who the best entities are for influencing when it's related to the labor piece. So are the broadband authorities and the regional economic development entities the right targets? If so, or if not, who else should maybe be involved? Does anyone have thoughts on that? Who should be at the table related to good labor standards and broadband implementation?
All the usual people. Yeah, right. Like your unions, just not just the electrical ones, right? The whatever ones work around that. Commissioners, yeah, that's like a whole list. And the other group I was in, we talked a lot about mapping out yeah, like whose voices need to be heard, whose voices haven't been heard, which ones are usually there. And then talking more about networking or matchmaking, just to bring them together for conversations about things or to create communities of practice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the questions we've had, one reason we think, obviously the broadband authority or broadband authorities is one audience, because in the end, they oversee the development of plans and the extent to which they incorporate the recommended labor standards from the national guidance and the recommended enforcement. The NTIA notice of, what's it called? No funding opportunity, I think it's called, actually is really strong when it comes to labor standards and also when it comes to the issue of workforce training. But the question then becomes, do states actually follow that guidance? Because they don't have to. And do they have real enforcement? So our recommendations obviously are to follow those standards and have strong enforcement. But one of the entities that in each state that we're going to engage with is the Broadband Authority. We've already talked to the Broadband Authority in Pennsylvania about these issues. And one of the observation in our interviews has been that a lot of the regional economic entities, economic development entities, planning and economic development entities that tend to be engaged around the broadband issue, they tend not necessarily to know a lot about labor standards, prevailing wage laws. There's some kind of a reflexive, local governments in general tend to be opposed to things like prevailing wage laws, which is one of the widespread labor standards that exists in construction. So I don't know whether folks in this group we're thinking we should be trying to educate those entities, those regional entities, as well as the State Broadband Authority around the fact that these labor standards issues are real issues, and you get what you pay for. And so when folks cut corners, no one in the end benefits. But I don't do. Again, folks who are engaged with the broadband issue locally, do we need to do that? Any particular guidance in terms of who and how we should do our research and advocacy on labor standards?
I see that Jen Blatz has her hand raised, and then Pat Clark, you'll be after that then.
Hey, everybody. So just backing up a tiny bit, Steve, about, I think you're absolutely correct about doing education about labor standards. I have tried to have some discussions with labor folks here in Allegheny County, and they sort of sprint past me like, I've got a train to catch, and they run away when I start talking to them about this. So I think, talking to the, not only the labor folks themselves about finding some people to bring together for like roundtable discussions would be a really smart move, specific to this issue, because I think a lot of people think that Comcast and Verizon installers are all union, and a lot of them are not. And a lot of people just don't even understand that dimension. The other thing I'll say is about a year ago, I started going to Chamber of Commerce events with my little dog and pony show story about workforce development. This is a workforce development issue. And again, people sprint away from me now, like, they hope they never see me again, because I've been pestering these people now for like a year, and they're like, oh God, here she comes again. But I do think that there is real value in, and I think everywhere around the state of Pennsylvania, anyways, I don't know about other states in Appalachia, we have a kind of fragmented workforce development ecosystem, and we're not going to be able to solve that with this. But I think that's the best tack to take if we're trying to get some private dollars, involved in this down the road, is we have to convince some of these bigger players that it benefits us all to not have shoddy contractors installing all this stuff and then running over the hill with all of our tax dollars. And Steve, you and I could talk more about this offline, but I mean, in this year, our coalition in Allegheny County does intend to do some focus on this workforce development piece. So we would love to partner with you on this.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Pat, I'm going to let you jump in too.
I will jump. Thank you. The last time I actually, Molly, I mentioned to you my painful experience with Zoom last running a session. I believe that involved Mr. Herzenberg as well. It was for one of the lefty groups with which I am associated. My first knee jerk was get all the lefty groups involved that are all about labor and affordable access to resources and good jobs and all that sort of stuff. But I paused momentarily and said, but more than that, this cuts across a whole swath of what are your standard political assumptions, because we're dealing with the places where I live now in urban large city America, but we're also dealing in the hick towns that I grew up in the middle of nowhere, which have equal needs. And I think there's a huge opportunity to focus on independent and advocacy organizations to move the ball on this, not wanting, I mean, I won't speak for the Chamber of Commerce, but I think folks on both sides of the aisle get kind of sick of corporatist interests getting everything ahead of, as you will, regular Americans. And this is a good example of that. And I think we should leverage that.
So I'm going to jump in here with, I participated in the workshop on abandoned mine lands earlier, about an hour ago. And actually with an eye to what we can take from that work, because the labor standards work that ReImagine has done on abandoned mine lands has sort of been ahead of the curve. Some of that's because Dana Kuhnlein, the campaign manager for ReImagine, and has been the coordinator for the Reclaim Coalition nationally. And so, from the beginning, I had fantastic connections, including to the Department of Interior. And actually, a bunch of labor organizations were quick out of a worry about how to make sure, given the massive increase in abandoned mine land reclamation funds, in a field which historically has been pretty non-union because it's been a small amount of money and given out in dribs and drabs that don't attract union contractors, which tend to be somewhat bigger. So anyway, there were two very specific ideas that I think make sense in the broadband area that came out of the AML discussion. One was, in Kentucky, they organized kind of at the state level, driven in part, I think, by the Kentucky AFL-CIO, but also with some help from the laborers. They organized, state officials, broadband authority, sort of a discussion around the labor standards in AML work, building on some fantastic research work that was done by the Ohio River Valley Institute, including, again, documenting in that particular field that you get what you pay for. And so when you use experienced union contractors, then you get, better value, not just better jobs. So I feel like that we can take a hard look at who they invited to that Kentucky convening. And actually the guy from the laborers volunteered to help adapt lessons learned for broadband. The second thing that they emphasized is that, about 9 months ago, the first wave of work ReImagine did was around the research and engagement with the federal advocacy around the federal guidelines, comments on the draft federal guidelines. But then partway through that process, to some extent at the state level, some of the unions involved began to pull in their union contractors and contractor associations. And so again, employers sometimes have clout, or employers in conjunction with unions and other advocates have clout that goes beyond what you can do without those employers. And so I think both of those, in broadband, it's going to be a mix of contractors plus the unionized internet service providers, which means the communications workers, and the IBW has some of those ISPs too. But I think those are two of the ways in which I think we can advance the labor standards issue in broadband going forward. And again, the first of those ways, the Kentucky meeting that they did on abandoned mineland labor standards, overlaps some of what Jen was saying in terms of the kinds of conversation we could try to help encourage in the Pittsburgh region. But, all right. Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw things. How much time do we have?
Well, so I was just going to say, we've got about 15 minutes before we get kicked back into the main room. So I was kind of thinking what might be helpful. I would love for these last 15 minutes to hear from you all on what other issues you see related to this broadband implementation moving forward, and specifically, what can ReImagine Appalachia do to help? If there's specific action items that you feel like we'd be good to be connected with, or just any issues that you might want to highlight related to broadband. We'll kind of just open it up as a free for all.
I'd like to see some efforts, if I may kick this off by suggesting working with the school districts and housing authorities to promote awareness of the ACP program. I think that we're still, that's still a conversation that hasn't been fully had. Does everybody know about this federal benefit yet? And those are prime groups of people where you've got tens of thousands of potentially qualifying households in county areas that can be controlled and assessed and spoken to. And, when you get into a school district, Jen and I have had this conversation. You can encumber the district with sending the material home. They do it every day. It's part and parcel to what they do and how they interact with the families of their students. So you don't have to have this enormous budget of we need to how do we print 20,000 worksheets to go home? The school districts already do this. It's part of their weekly correspondence with households. But do they know, how do they know about this benefit? So can ReImagine Appalachia focus on, can they target school districts and housing, subsidized housing groups, which are in the county and city housing authorities, and communicate with those residents and students, households, to make sure they're aware of the benefit.
Thank you, Chris. And I should also have added this at the beginning. We are taking really extensive notes on all of this, so we'll be making sure to share that and follow up, and hoping to use that as we create our work plan. So what more? Let's throw them out there.
Let me just, I want to serve, I managed to, as translator. So ACP just is Affordable Connectivity Program, and Chris mentioned there was a $30 a month subsidies, right, Chris? Yeah, I think it is, for low-income families. So so that's a great idea. We work with some K through 12 advocates, Chris, and so I will take your suggestion to them, and we'll probably be back in touch. So keep going, Molly.
Yeah, anyone else? What else do we got?
Just as a shameless plug again for Pennsylvania people, twice a month, we have started a coalition of coalitions meeting where we're trying to get people from all across the state to just meet and share information. And typically we have at least one, if not more, representatives from the Broadband Authority who've been coming to those gatherings. And it's been really helpful to, instead of having to like dig in your email or find people or figure out what they've actually been very responsive to us when we've been able to kind of corral them. And we meet every other Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So if anybody from Pennsylvania wants to join those meetings, I'm happy to put you on the calendar invitation. And it's just a good way to share, information in real time.
And I would say maybe for folks that aren't from Pennsylvania, you could maybe look to be inspired and create a very like-minded one in your state that we would love to promote. So
absolutely.
I had saw like Devin and Pat had both came off mute. So I don't know, maybe Pat, if you want to go first, looks like you're off mute, and then Devin.
Yeah, just real quickly, I'm actually looking for input. My firm has done a series of projects since 2014, where we started in the Larimer neighborhood of Pittsburgh, running what we call a community census that gathers community-owned data across a whole range of the social determinants of health and community development factors and whatever the community wants to know from one another. And we typically, in almost every one of these, have gathered data on people's access to the internet and broadband to inform our clients. This is the first time we will be doing one of these projects. We've done these projects from Erie all the way down to Charleston, West Virginia. And this is the first time I feel that we have the opportunity to do something with this data, to be able to say, in the project I'm working on right now in Penn Hills, even though the map says that Penn Hills is groovy and don't worry about it, but maybe not so, that we'll be able to find out if people have hurdles to get access to broadband, what those hurdles are, affordability, don't like the provider, whatever those are, that we may be able to put those into use as we compile them. We're going to start gathering data over the next 60 days here. So anybody wants to follow up with me and say, hey, ask them this will be useful. More than glad to use that as sort of a pilot for what we might be able to do on this. Bearing in mind, Penn Hills will probably get somewhere from 10 to 15% of all the households to participate, would be my estimate. But in smaller communities, we'll get from 40 to 60% of all the households to tell us what's up. And I think that's a useful function that I'd like to be able to put applicable to this initiative, however we might do that.
Thank you, Pat.
So let me also articulate another kind of information that we're really interested in getting. A lot of the rest of our principles beyond like 4 through 8 are in different ways. They're about getting value for money, and not how do we make sure that the big for-profit ISPs don't get lots of public money without delivering very much for it, right? How do we make sure we come as close as possible to the kind of universal high-speed, affordable, reliable broadband that really is a necessity now and should be universal now, right? That's so we're really interested in kind of positive stories, various specific ideas, making sure municipalities and cooperatives, if existing ISPs won't deliver what we need, making sure, again, those other providers can step in, having little bits or having some portion of the middle mile network be publicly owned, negotiating terms with internet service providers, to they maintain the middle mile network, but again, the public sector retains a piece of it, giving out the money to county or multi-county entities that have more capacity, again, investing in leadership development, capacity development locally, so that local communities are less likely to get bad deals from internet service providers. They're all ideas that are groping towards, again, how do we get better value for money? And so we really would love more positive examples. In Pennsylvania, we know that the Altoona region, had a decent project over a period of time that may lead to better quality broadband. We know that in Pocahontas County, West Virginia, tiny little county, they were the first county in West Virginia to develop a broadband council. We're looking for examples of co-ops that are kind of best practice examples, including, if we can find it, some unionized co-op examples. So yeah, folks who, if you know of positive examples, of places managing in the end to upgrade their broadband, and get good value for whatever public subsidies they access, those kinds of examples are really important to share.
We can continue to hear from other folks. I think Devin was next. I don't know if you still had something you wanted to share, Devin.
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes my audio connection isn't the best using these headphones. And not related to a place-based stories. Unfortunately, I wish I could provide an example to back it up. In a kind of a different level, I guess, I think that there's an opportunity for partnerships or kind of advocacy relationships with large banking institutions or community banks. COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of more people are using online banking and banking from home rather than going into bank branches. And I think that even the large banks are looking to grow their customer base within a base that doesn't traditionally bank, right? And so there's an equity component as well. So I think that the principles that you all have put together are pretty well positioned to pitch to banks. I mean, not necessarily for funding, right, but for as a partner to ensure the type of quality work that you all are looking to implement in Appalachia. I wish I had more details. That's just kind of a hunch or an instinct that I'm seeing at the national level.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Jen. Agreed. What else? Any other thoughts from folks? We have probably a little bit under 5 minutes, I'd say. So any lingering thoughts? If not, I mean, like I said, Cameron has been taking some really great notes for us, and I did jot down. I feel like we do have a couple quicker next steps, and then also some longer term next steps that maybe ReImagine could take. But again, I want to give everyone the opportunity to throw anything else out there before we think about our work plan. But
Well, I just want to underscore that the mapping challenge is not over, that we can continue to submit challenges, and the BEAD dollars will be released. Like, everyone will get some on top of the planning dollars that they've already gotten. So there will still be these structures in each county where people will have this money and say, well, what's the plan? What do we do? How do we? And so we need to make sure that there are advocates on the ground in front of those people, ensuring that those who are in fact left behind on the other side of the digital divide are spoken for, and that somebody is advancing their on their behalf, this agenda on their behalf. Because guess what? They're not online. They don't know what's going on with this stuff. You know, it's not in their wheelhouse. That's by definition why they're left behind in this area. So we've got to maintain focus on that advocacy after the dollars are released, and not be distracted by the fact of what could have been, what should have been, the timing, or just how incredibly amazing hundreds of millions of dollars is. We still got a mission here with broadband and connecting those households, not just to hotspots, but to gigabit or 10 gigabit fiber in every house.
Absolutely, yeah. Making sure that folks are not only getting the broadband, but know how to use it is certainly a big challenge. Any other final thoughts from anyone? If not, I guess we almost are kind of wrapping up early. Steve, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask, or any lingering thoughts?
No, I think, yeah, no, I think I'm good.
Cool. So it'll move us automatically back to the main room in probably like another 2 minutes. If you want to maybe even turn your video off and go take a quick break, you can. When we get back to the main room, we are going to be spending a couple moments talking about both of the sessions that happened today, or both of the breakout sessions, as well as the panel. So we'd love it if you want to stay for a little bit longer to talk through everything. We'll have a couple metameters put up again so that we can see what happened in the other breakout sessions. So we'd love to have you stay, but also if you need to run, we understand. But yeah, we should be moving back to the main room at any moment. So I think if you want, in the meantime, you can already head back to the main room. That's probably where I'll go once everyone else leaves. So thanks for joining our broadband breakout. Be on the lookout for our follow-up steps. Hey, Annie. Our group kind of wrapped up a minute or so early, so we decided to come back.
Amazing. We missed y'all.
Okay, I can probably turn this device off now. So everyone else is coming back in like a minute or less. Okay.
Yes.
I see. Everyone's kind of popping back in again. Hello for folks coming back. Thanks for joining us. We're actually going to spend a little bit of time debriefing everything that happened today. So please feel free to stay on and hear from other folks. But we'll wait another minute or so for everyone else to kind of linger back in here.
I think we're there. Welcome everybody. Thanks for sticking with us for the last couple hours. We have a little bit of couple things we're going to ask from you all. First, we have a survey for the day. If you already took it once, you can take it more than once. You can, oh, thank you, Molly. We both put it in there at the same time. but you get to enter to win a bandana or we have stickers as well if you want something that says ReImagine Appalachia on it. But really, we just really want your opinion and we really value your time. So second, I think we're going to do a couple while y'all can sit on that, but I think we're going to do a couple of those interactive questions for the group as we're trickling back in. Do you have those ready to go, Annie?
Yes, let me drop the first one in the chat and then I'll share my screen.
Great. So this is a question for what's the main reason you joined us today? We're looking to learn, we have a lot of events at ReImagine Appalachia. That's one of the big things we do as a coalition. And it's so helpful for us to make sure that our content and programming is relevant. So in order to do that, we figured every now and then we should just ask you all to tell us. So you should tell us, why are you here? Why are we doing this? So it's so incredibly helpful for us when you guys do us the honor of sharing your, why you're here with us today. So we'll give that a minute to fill out. Just a quick note about next steps. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. we have our second keynote panel. It's going to be focusing on community benefits and how to grow those with new federal funding. One thing I just said in our labor conversation was that the work to improve the lives of workers, to improve environmental quality, to make sure communities are empowered to make their decisions about their own community, that work has been going on for decades. It's not new, but what is new is this incredible opportunity we have with federal funding in the region. And so we're going to be hearing from folks who've been doing this work for decades on their thoughts on how we can use this new opportunity to expand community benefits in the region and make sure Appalachians who need the money the most are seeing those benefits. So I think we'll move to this next poll question, if you don't mind, Annie. And so you'll see a second poll popping up in the survey, in the chat. If you can drop that in there. I've been talking a lot. All right, there's the second one we'll fill that out again. And then we'll also have a series of breakout sessions after the panel tomorrow. As folks are filling out this survey, I'm looking the wrong one. This one is one next step you're going to do or topic you're going to look into after the summit. So for this one, I encourage you all to answer that in the chat, but I also encourage you all to go off mute. So this is a moment for us, if you want to share really quickly something that you're really excited about that you saw in the workshop, or something that you feel like you can build on. So you can answer this in the poll, please do. Otherwise the screen will look very boring. But we also encourage you after you answered in the poll to come off mute and you can actually tell us with your mouths talking. Ooh, electric transfer. There's the winner. There you go. That's the biggest one. I'm excited. Oh, this is great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anybody want to share quick takeaways or things that they were excited about that they saw in their panels? It can be I'll call on people if you but go ahead and just talk and come off mute.
One thing that came up this is Jordy Comas in Pennsylvania. One thing that came up in the faith group was that really set off a lot of sparks in my head was the idea of community benefit agreements. That was as a way for especially faith groups that maybe don't see themselves as viable for government funding. It's like a mechanism to be able to apply for that, or for coalitions that include those groups. But I also started thinking about all of the nonprofits that are nonprofits in name only, that don't really behave like nonprofits, and that's a tool maybe to get them to stop behaving like Fortune 500 companies that have a fig leaf of a nonprofit. I'm probably well known for being too vocal with my opinions, but that was one thing that I really appreciated.
That's great. Thank you, Jordy. Other folks have takeaways, or facilitators have takeaways?
This is Natalia.
Please.
I think one of the big challenges that we're all going to face that will require a lot of cooperation across every type of organization, whether it's grassroots coalitions on the ground or DC federally based organizations. And I don't know, but I believe we had Imam, again, from our faith group. I don't recall the last name at our group, talking about how we have to make it plain. We have to make it plain for so many of our organizations. And, you know, we appreciate so much of the federal guidance, and the federal guidance is often hundreds of pages long with many, many links. And whether it's local government or our nonprofits or some of our houses of worship, it's really difficult with low capacity to figure out how to take advantage of these opportunities. So, I mean, I would even ask that if there are organizations who are here with us who have documents to make it plain, and to demystify some of these federal funding sources in a step-by-step fashion, email me. We'd be happy to figure out how to disseminate some of that.
Matt, thanks for raising your hand.
Thanks. Something I took away from the breakout session I facilitated was someone mentioned the development of local advisory committees in terms of bringing more folks to the table. And specifically, they mentioned hearing other voices besides those who are economically viable to volunteer for these organizations. And I thought that was really, I guess, insightful, because, you know, working with communities for so many years, you often get repeat volunteers, right? You get the same voices heard at these meetings, or the folks that are financially able to make it to that meeting, dedicate that time, have childcare, have the wraparound services needed to get there. So I don't know how you go from there, but really insightful. They mentioned something along the lines of potentially having a stipend for those to come out and dedicate their time to hear from those underrepresented folks, frankly, because they're supporting themselves, their families, and others in their neighborhood potentially. So thank you for the opportunity to participate today, and look forward to the next session.
Yeah, I had a conversation a few weeks ago, right before the break, I guess. But they were saying, you know, if all of these new projects are going to have these so all the new projects through the Department of Energy are going to have some kind of community benefit attached to them, so which is exciting. It's a wonderful proposal. It's a wonderful policy, and then we have ourselves to pat on the back to see that policy as part of new Department of Energy funding. But they're saying, like, it's going to be the same, like they're going to be asking going to the same groups, the same people, the same leaders over and over again for all of these conversations for all these new projects. And then, you know, with the amount of money we're looking at, it really could be quite a lot. And so I appreciate you lifting that up, that there is actually going to be this kind of interesting burden of communities. The short timeline, I get it, as far as the need to, you know, quickly decarbonize and build up clean energy, but it does not favor the lower resource communities, is what I'll say. So we're going to be seeing some interesting pressures. So it's great to acknowledge that, and I think to be thinking about those in advance. Other folks want to share takeaways or learnings, or kind of, you know, what they might want to, what they're kind of taking with them or might be building on going forward. And oh, I love it. I love it, Jenny. Build those green tech hubs. So I think I'll leave it at that. I really appreciate all y'all's time. Folks seem quiet. I totally get it. Your brains are full. It's been a busy 3 hours. We'll see folks again tomorrow. If you're not joining us tomorrow, you're invited to we have our twice monthly campaign update meetings. And then we also do have a series of events that is on our website, ReImagine Appalachia It's, we have it. in the-
.org/events.
Thank you. Thank you. Just put it in there. Put it in there. Nobody's going to memorize what I say anyway. Yeah, so if you want to continue joining us, like I said, we'll get a wrap-up email with materials. There's been so many incredible links shared, and so we're going to do our best to try and capture those again in that wrap-up email with notes and all that. So Eric, I'm sitting here reading your comments. So thanks again to all of our incredible facilitators, speakers, behind the scenes, tech queens. That's your, you can put that on your business card, Annie.
Where's Annie? Wave your hand.
And Molly.
Our Zoom wizard. Molly,
and who here got an email from Molly up to Grove? Has anyone ever got an email?
Everybody here got an email from Molly.
So
wave Molly.
Molly doesn't want you to acknowledge her, but go ahead and do mentally so she doesn't see it.
Bad.
She'll let her feel the good energy. Great. So I think we'll close out. I was just so excited reading Eric's all these beautiful comments coming in the chat. I'm just going to read those, and we'll hopefully see you all tomorrow. And thank you all.
Great day.
Appreciate y'all. Any last comments? We're heading out. All right. Y'all have a good day. Oh, so much exciting stuff is happening. Oh, great. All right. Lots of work to do, guys. On to the next thing.
Oh, man. Everyone needs a nap now.
Did y'all eat lunch? Did anybody eat lunch?
Lunch.
What's lunch?
Great work, great speakers. This was really wonderful. I hope we can go forward. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patty. Thanks for note taking.
Oh, you won't believe what I've got typed. I got to clean it up. They talk faster than I type.
I know.
I have no idea.
The slides are great, so it'll help.
Good. I tried to record, but I don't know what happened. So we'll see if I have recordings for my workshops, by the way. So.
Oh man. Yeah, it's I don't know why it's so tricky.
Well, it was like when the breakout rooms closed, I didn't think to push stop both times. Clearly I'm not, so I don't know. Is it just gonna be like one long recording? I don't know what's going to happen. So I think when I leave this room, I'll see what ends up on my computer. It'll either be 2 hours long.
It probably will
So
be.
I wanted to refer folks to this program if there is a replay. But we don't know if there's a replay. Is that right?
No, we will.
The panel's on Facebook, right?
I'm sorry, what?
The panel, the preliminary panel is on Facebook.
Yeah. So for the workshops, Jenny,
yeah,
Zoom makes it hard for us to record the workshops. So we are hopeful that we have a recording of every workshop, but we are not guaranteeing that. So but we definitely
we're not that optimistic about that.
But we know we have the panel.
We'll share them.
Yeah, and we'll share whatever we have, whatever we come back.
Okay, that's good to know because I'd like to refer some folks to this who couldn't make it today. So.
And we do have
Annie's ready to do some editing, I think, to like maybe turn them into short video clips.
In a few weeks.
Yeah, I think Annie gets
not
tomorrow. Not by tomorrow. We gotta see. I wasn't in any of the workshops, so I don't know what's been said. But
poor Annie never gets to join.
Me and Steve had a broadband moment. I put it in the chat. So what we've been wanting to do is all of the moments we have on our calls where someone's broadband goes out to like make a compilation is for one of our like broadband videos to say like,
oh my gosh, Dana, that's what you meant when you sent me that message. I thought like Steve said something really like inspiring.
No, I said he said something like on our broadband work and like when it immediately went pixelated. So like it was just it couldn't have been more perfect. So I see a couple of you are still on and so we're just chatting amongst ourselves, but can I open the floor if anybody who's still on has something to say? Please feel free to shout it out. We have a minute or two. Just come off mute. Go ahead, Jenny.
It was great. I really enjoyed making the connections and hearing what people are doing. I'm kind of inspired now to gather my little group in Ohio and West Virginia together and put it on the ground.
Amazing.
Yay.
Yeah.
We're so glad you came, Jenny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, really.
I feel like we're very privileged in our work at ReImagine, because working at the coalition level, you get to see so many amazing people and so much brilliant work all the time. And so I realize how selfish we are. We need to share all these wonderful things that come across our desks. So yeah, thank you, Jenny. I'm glad we got to kind of finally share how all the brilliance in the region that we get to see from where we are.
There, and that's neat to know that it's out there and that we can capture it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So easy to get siloed, I think.
Oh, it is. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Especially down in these hollers down here. Yeah.
And you have to, I mean, I think you have to do the local work, because that's where it starts. And that's the one thing we don't do at ReImagine, is that really local level. I mean, that's why we need folks doing that. But then it's like, so how do you get all the folks who are doing that work that has to happen at the local level also, communicating at that regional level? So that's the puzzle. So anybody else who's still here? I'm assuming y'all are still here because you just got us playing in the background.
I got to run. Thanks.
All right. Steve.
Hey, who the Act Now woman was she one of Brandon's folks?
Stephanie Tyree.
Is that probably, yeah.
So she has her own organization called the
Okay.
She is absolutely brilliant. And also very, very busy, but they're a little bit different from Brandon. They work extremely closely with Coalfield Development, but they provide direct support to around 30 or so per year. I mean, it's not necessarily the same ones, to help West Virginia communities and nonprofits apply for federal funding. And so a big part of that work in West Virginia has been about facilitating coalitions and collaborations to help smaller groups band together. So that's kind of what her whole career has been. And so the Act Now is one of the most recent incredible things.
What's the name of her organization?
It's called the West Virginia Hub. Let me put the link in the chat.
It's okay. It's okay. I remember it, but it's just interesting. So it's okay. I mean,
I think it's West Virginia Community Hub.
Yeah, I mean, colloquially they go by Hub.
Oh, the Hub.
But it's the Community Development Hub is actually what it is. But the idea is
it's another example of the kind of thing that's, well, on the one hand, Natalia talked about in West Virginia, which is all these other people's efforts to address the capacity challenges around getting the federal money. And then also makes me think of the call with one of the planning entities that we did, John something or other, in West Virginia, whose own organization for a multi-county region does a lot of technical assistance around federal grants. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, we do follow the Hub's work pretty closely and try to recommend folks to them and all, and have a.
It's good to know about it. It makes the idea of the consortium more challenging. I mean, it's obviously a good thing. I mean, the fact that lots of people embedded on the ground have been doing work to leverage federal money already for some period of time, right? I mean, obviously that's fantastic, but it makes the issue of how do we add value and how do we do it in a way that complements what's already exists, more challenging in a way. But anyway, you know that better than I do, Natalia.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
So I'll just say I feel really good about how today went, just from a logistics perspective. Is there anything we need to debrief or check in on before tomorrow? It sounds like folks.
I think we're pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, then. So I will let you all go. I actually have a 2:30 with our labor crew. We're really working them to the bone. Working them to the bone.
Which labor crew? Is this the AML one?
The AML one, yeah.
I have the chat saved, by the way, Annie, so I'm good there.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, I see.
Do we have our labor, or sorry, our federal call?
No, those were rescheduled. The next one will be the 31st.
It's
They're gonna
still
be.
on my calendar, so I don't know.
I think
What's
it
that?
must
It's
be
on
like
mine too. You have
it
to
must be
delete
like a
it.
personal thing because I did delete it and send it to everyone, but I think you have to like actually
Okay.
personally go and delete it maybe. But it should be on the 31st, which is a Tuesday at 1 instead from now on, and then it's going to be every other week from there.
That's what I thought. I was so confused. Got it.
Maybe I'll send a note out to our policy call that's saying that it's like a zombie and won't die, but it does not exist. So
So Dana, you were you in the AML breakout? You weren't, right?
I was in the AML breakout.
Oh,
Yes.
you were. Oh, all right. Okay. So okay, because well, then I think I said this then, but I felt like yeah, the Kentucky meeting, which I want to know more about, might be a model for something in broadband, right?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
happy to read you in on that. We can have a talk. It's
Yeah, but I'd like to see who was invited. But again, my impression is that the AFL-CIO president in Kentucky, Bill, what's his name, Londrigan, helped get that started. But obviously, the guy from the laborers that was in the AML workshop was also actively involved in that.
yeah,
just-
Lonnie and then Chad Mills as well from the
So
Kentucky.
for Kentucky and probably for Pennsylvania. Yeah, okay. So I want to take a hard look at what they did because it feels like a straight adaptation might work for Kentucky and Pennsylvania in broadband. And then because in a way, what I was sort of hearing is that they've done a meeting. Well, in the broadband space, you've got all these regional entities, all these economic development entities, which are going to be hard when it comes to labor standards. And it almost sounded like they managed to do a state level conversation that didn't cut out the region. Well, I mean, I guess you don't have analogs to the regional economic development entities in AML because it's basically the state plus the contractors and the unions. There aren't all these intermediaries that don't like prevailing wage or unions, or at least I don't think you have that as much. But anyway,
the state government itself. So I mean, the state government was in the room. Thanks, Tracy. Good luck on the hearing.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was just gonna ask Tracy what she thought. All right.
So
I would
one
love
of the
to
things-
see a list of who our final registrants were and are, and who showed up. I think I counted at one point like 230. I think was the high number I wrote down.
Yeah, and I'll update that. The regular registrant list I can update fairly quickly today, but we did take screenshots of who was in each of the breakout rooms in case the note takers didn't write that down, and that might take me a while to just like
Oh, that's fun.
go back and forth. But when we have that, that should be pretty indicative too of who was where. Yeah, I know last year Natalia wanted to do some follow-ups with her one breakout, and we didn't have the attendance for it, so we tried to capture that this year. So
Good.
I will
I
give you
didn't
that
even think
too.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah. That might just not happen today though.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Take your time. Yeah, and Steve on the Kentucky stuff, I think it's a bigger conversation, but maybe we can have a one-on-one call on Friday morning or something and walk through it.
Well, is there anything we can extrapolate? Like, if generally speaking is a best practice, maybe we want to write that down.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for the Kentucky stuff, it is different in each state. And so each state has had its own approach. Certainly for the AML, you're certainly correct, Steve, that there's different forces in that there's not a regional force for mine lands, there's a state force and a federal force. And regardless, in this case, in the room, who was there was with the Kentucky governor's office and the state enforcement agency on the issue, and then labor was in the room, and then the environmentals were in the room, and so it was basically all the players that really had the ability to move this forward were getting together, and they had all their policies, and they talked about what was possible. So I think in that way it's it's totally replicable. It's just who the players are kind of varies. And I will say with the governor's office thing, I think they had to work their way up, but in this case, so they started with like somebody's assistant secretary cabinet, and then they met with somebody else, and then they actually got the actual governor in the room. But having the muscle of the feds helps, and the feds want that, they want the helps getting the states. You don't want to pull in the muscle too quickly, because there can be some resentment between the state and the feds. But I think if you can find the right time to bring them conducive to, so what happened, and in a similar way, they had another meeting that had hoped to have similar impact actually in Illinois a week later, and it was not very successful because they hadn't done the amount of pre-work to get to that point. And so the labor and the environmental folks, they had a friendly relationship. It was cordial, but they didn't have like a written down set of shared policy recommendations that were extremely concrete, which they had in Kentucky. And so so the timing was what it was. There was no control over when that could happen, but like the meeting opportunity happened when it happened. But I think the Kentucky one was like, just folks felt so good coming out of it because they were just so ready, and when they had all that pre-work. And so that's certainly
and the Kentucky agreed upon standards was the RA ones, or an adaptation of the RA?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, no, exactly. So Eric, worked so closely with Lonnie and Chad when he pulled those recommendations together. So it was that, yeah.
Okay.
And so in our case, so our broadband principals, you've been so painstakingly getting all those labor folks on board with them. So I think we would certainly have the homework in the broadband case, but just broadly extrapolating, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as good as AML, but it's getting there. So
yeah, well,
I think that's part of what makes it's unique, sort of research-led approach, but it's really effective, I think. Building the understanding and then the recommendations together.
Right. The other thing, again, I don't know how much this was a story Eric was telling or it's true, but the other thing, again, that I picked up on was, he said that in addition to pivoting to the states at some level or at some point in the AML advocacy, the other thing he talked about was bringing in the contractors. And again, I'm sort of asking you a question, Dana. I mean, I was in on at least one meeting early with some of those contractors and contractor associations. And again, in theory, it sounds exactly right that those folks have clout in combination with labor and other advocates that labor and the other advocates don't have without the employers. And so, again, I'm tempted to say that's a best practice that we should at least be, thinking about with respect to broadband.
Yeah.
Unless you tell me that's a story that it's a nice idea, but hasn't necessarily yet really been converted into impact.
I guess, I mean, we've just had so much. I don't know how it translates to broadband, so I'll just tell you what happened with AML, and you can tell me if it translates. And I do have to jump in 5 minutes. But with AML, we were able to easily get the people whose job it is to advocate for and communicate with all those contractors on a call. Like, they were like, sure, let's talk. And they were immediately on board. They were immediately excited about the opportunity. And so they reached out to their people. And so in West Virginia, they ended up putting together a meeting with the West Virginia DEP, and the West Virginia DEP, just had a meeting that was like, here are the type of projects we think are coming, like, here's how the bidding is going to work, like, do you have questions? And so they just had this like open Q&A with all the contractors, because, not necessarily because of us, but certainly like we followed that track of that happening. And that didn't necessarily happen 100% replica in Ohio. I think in Kentucky, it was very similar where, Chad and Lonnie they know all of the people, and they were very quickly on board and wanting to get this information out as quickly as possible so that their guys could get the work. And so they were very helpful and eager to facilitate those conversations, with the bosses. And so I wouldn't, I don't know how the hierarchy works out. I know more about the building trades at this point, but like, if there's some kind of hierarchy like that with the broadband, then they would be excited to.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I need to do a one-on-one call with Lonnie, who I don't know.
Yeah, he's so nice.
Yeah, obviously, I know probably some of his counterparts in Pennsylvania, but and
well,
then
he's the one that said he wanted that he used this
Yeah.
as a model to like work on other stuff.
Yeah, no, he was game. He volunteered to help on broadband specifically. So that's good. Chad? Who's Chad?
Chad Mills is I'm sorry, he's a big building trades guy in Kentucky, and I cannot remember what his specific organization is.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
It's KSBCTC. If that tells you why I can't remember it. But
Building Trades Council.
Yeah, there it is. So Kentucky State building something. Okay.
Well, I won't bore you with the details, but what's congealing in my head is probably I hope. I mean, we didn't get many labor people at the broadband breakout, which is fine. I mean, CWA has been very generous with their time. We had a bunch of people on that December 7th call. I could have done, I mean, a bunch of people were signed up, but then maybe went to other workshops, right? So I feel like there's a labor only planning discussion that we can do, but we need to do a couple more information gathering calls first. 'Cause again, there are differences. I don't know whether Windstream or Verizon, I don't know whether unionized ISPs can be persuaded by their unions to play at all.
Because it's such a different scale with the broadband. Like, so that's why I don't know again where the parallels are. Because I think it's not as much of a monopoly with the AML work as you see with the broadband. So I don't know.
Right. There's a bunch of small, medium-sized contractors that are looking at a new market and are excited about participating in that new market. Yeah, it's different.
But what, certainly I think the strongest thing from the AML stuff, the reason they got involved was because it's big, it's confusing, it's like a fire hose, and they saw free help to help them process all of this information to get their guys jobs. So I think, that was basically the service we were offering, and I think the service we gave. And so, through Eric. And so there was a guy, I've seen his name before, but he was offering some research support for all this too. So I don't know if that matters for broadband, but I think if the broadband, contractors see the need, want help translating the opportunity into jobs, then that's the value add that we have for them. And getting access, the other thing they don't have is the access to the federal agencies, because they don't have the history. They don't even know they wouldn't know offhand which federal agencies to even be in touch with on AML. I don't know if that's the same for broadband. And so because we had those historic relationships with the DOI, we were able to just get those meetings really easily. I mean, a bunch of our old staffers work at the DOI.
Here's the contractors, in the end up being subs to whether it's an ISP or to a regional entity that gets money. Yeah. So in the end, they may not even have any direct contract with the state. And so, so it's different, but okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Go
right.
for you next. Bye.
Godspeed.